The Bible says Enoch did not die, and that single sentence has been made to sound almost peaceful. A righteous man walked with God, vanished from the earth, and escaped the grave like a holy exception. But the darker tradition suggests something far worse than rescue, reward, or a gentle ascent into heaven. Enoch was not taken away from death. Enoch was taken away from being human. And in the later mystical texts, what happened next does not read like a blessing. It reads like a body being converted into a celestial instrument. Flesh to flame, veins to fire, eyes to torches. Human identity burned into heavenly office. This is not a story about a prophet being lifted up. This is a story about a man becoming raw material for something heaven needed. And the name that came after the burning was not Enoch, the name was Metatron. Chapter 1. The Man Without a Grave. Genesis gives Enoch only a few lines, but those lines behave like a sealed door in the text. The old genealogies repeat the same pattern again and again. A man lived, he had children, and he died. Adam died, Seth died, Enoch died, Kenan died. The rhythm is heavy, almost mechanical. Then Enoch appears, and the pattern breaks. Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more, because God took him. No death, no burial, no bones placed beside his ancestors, no final human trace left in the earth. The verse is quiet, but the silence around it is not empty. It leaves behind the question that later traditions could not stop asking. What does it mean to be so close to God that the normal ending of human life is canceled? The safe answer is that Enoch was rewarded. The darker answer is that Enoch was removed, not saved from the world, removed from the category of mankind. The body that should have aged, weakened, and returned to dust was interrupted before the grave could claim it. That is the first horror hidden under the beauty of the story. Enoch does not escape death by staying human forever. He escapes death because something stronger than death takes ownership of him first. The text does not give his family a farewell. It does not give the earth a body to receive. It gives only absence. And that absence becomes the first sign that Enoch's story has left human law. The grave is one of the oldest limits placed on mankind. It is the place where power, beauty, wisdom, and terror all become equal beneath the soil. But Enoch is denied even that ancient equality. He is not allowed to complete the human sentence. And once heaven claims a living body, the story cannot return to innocence. Chapter 2. The World That Marked Him. To understand why Enoch's removal feels so severe, you have to remember the world around him. His life is placed before the flood, in the old age of patriarchs, violence, and impossible lifespans. This is the world that later Enochic tradition fills with watchers, forbidden teaching, and corrupted order. It is a world where heaven and earth are already touching in the wrong places. The boundary is not stable. The air itself feels like it remembers an intrusion. In that world, Enoch is not only righteous, he is a witness. He walks through an age where divine judgment is already gathering above the horizon. He sees mankind moving toward ruin, and the tradition turns him into the one man fit to see the verdict. But that fitness is not comfort. Being chosen in these stories does not mean being protected from dread. It means being brought closer to the place where dread is manufactured. That is why Enoch's righteousness is so dangerous. A wicked man can be judged from a distance. A righteous man can be brought near. And nearness to the divine is never neutral in mythological horror. It does not simply bless, it exposes. It burns away excuses, shadows, and ordinary human boundaries. The closer Enoch walks with God, the thinner the distance becomes between his body and the throne. The walk is not a gentle friendship anymore. It is a line drawn across the earth, ending at a door no human body was built to pass through. Chapter 3. The ascent was not peaceful. The familiar version imagines Enoch rising gently, like a saint disappearing into light. But the Enochic imagination opens a much harsher door. Heaven is not described as a soft place built for human comfort. It is layered, guarded, burning, administrative, full of watchers, gates, courts, storehouses, and judgment. In the book of Enoch, the prophet is not merely lifted into beauty. He is shown the hidden machinery behind the world. He sees places where winds are kept, where stars are measured, where punishment waits beneath creation. He sees the architecture of divine order, and that order is not warm. It is precise, it is enormous. It is older than mercy as human beings understand it. That matters, because Enoch is not being invited into heaven like a guest. He is being moved through a system. Each gate takes him farther from the human world. Each vision strips away another layer of ordinary life. The earth becomes small beneath him. Human language becomes weak inside him. The man who once walked on soil now stands before forces that measure worlds, angels, and generations. And the closer he comes to the throne, the more his humanity becomes the problem. Because flesh can witness only so much before witness becomes transformation. A mortal body cannot stand forever beside unfiltered divine fire and remain merely mortal. The ascent was not the miracle. The ascent was the corridor leading to the furnace. Chapter 4. The stench of a human in heaven. Later, mystical tradition makes the discomfort explicit. When Enoch is brought upward, the angels do not simply welcome him. They notice him. They notice the human thing in the heavenly realm, the living body born from flesh and earth. That detail changes the entire story. To human beings, Enoch is righteous. To the angels, he is foreign material. He comes from below. He carries breath, memory, weight, appetite, weakness, and the mark of mortality. Heaven is not offended because Enoch is wicked. Heaven recoils because Enoch is human. Pause on that. The most righteous man of his generation is still unbearable in the highest realms because he belongs to dust. That is the boundary the story is really about. Not the boundary between good and evil, the boundary between flesh and fire. Enoch has crossed upward into a place where human nature is not simply fragile, it is incompatible. And when something incompatible enters a perfect order, that order has only one solution. It must either reject the intruder or rewrite him. The tradition chooses the more terrifying answer. Enoch is not cast out, Enoch is processed. Heaven does not remove the human body from its presence. Heaven changes the human body until it can survive there, and that is where the blessing becomes physical horror. Chapter 5. Flesh turned to fire. In 3, Enoch, the transformation is remembered with a force that still feels dangerous. The text does not say Enoch was given a gentle radiance. It says his flesh turned to flame. His sinews became blazing fire. His bones became burning coals. His eyes became torches. His eyelashes became flashes of lightning. And the substance of his body became living fire. This is the central image. A man does not put on divinity like a robe. A man is converted into another state of being. The parts of the body remain named, but their meaning is destroyed. Flesh is no longer flesh. Veins are no longer veins. Eyes no longer belong to human seeing. Everything that once made Enoch recognizable is translated into celestial material. Not killed, not healed, translated. And translation can be more frightening than death. Death ends the body. Transformation keeps the body as evidence. The old form is still there in outline, but its substance has been replaced by something impossible. Imagine the horror of remaining conscious while every human boundary inside you is rewritten. Not as punishment, not as rage, as appointment. Heaven does not need Enoch to suffer. Heaven needs Enoch to become usable. That is what makes the scene colder than ordinary violence. The fire is not cruelty. The fire is function. Chapter 6. The body that outgrew the world. The transformation does not stop with fire. The tradition expands Enoch into a scale no human image can comfortably hold. His body is enlarged until ordinary proportion collapses. He is given wings beyond natural number, eyes beyond natural counting, authority beyond natural rank. The man who once had 2 human eyes becomes a being of total witness. The man who once walked one path across the earth becomes a presence spread across heavenly administration. This is not simply angelic beauty, it is the loss of privacy inside the self. Every new eye is another function. Every new wing is another sign that the human frame has been exceeded. The body becomes an archive. It sees too much, it carries too much, it stands too close to the throne. That is the part most retellings soften. The horror is not only that Enoch changes, the horror is that the change makes sense. If he is to become the heavenly scribe, he must see what ordinary creatures cannot see. If he is to record the deeds of humanity, he must no longer possess a merely human gaze. If he is to stand inside divine order, the small body of Enoch must be broken open into office. The new form is terrifying because it is practical. Heaven does not decorate him. Heaven equips him, and the equipment is made from what used to be a man. Chapter 7. The crown that made him less human. The transformation also gives Enoch a new relationship to light. Human light is something we see by. Heavenly light, in this story, is something that sees through you. When the tradition places a crown on Metatron, the object is not only royal, it is administrative, judicial, and dangerous. A crown, says the changed being, now carries delegated authority. It says the man who once received visions has become part of the machinery that issues them. That is why the crown feels colder than a weapon. A weapon can be dropped. A crown rewrites the wearer. The crown does not ask Enoch whether he wants to remain Enoch. It seals the change already burning through him. And from that moment, his form is not private property anymore. His eyes belong to record. His wings belong to command. His fire belongs to the court above creation. The body has become an office, and the office has become a body. There is no clean line left between person and function. That is the real physical horror of Metatron. Not that his body becomes strange, but that every strange feature has a purpose, and every purpose takes him farther from himself. A torch does not choose where to shine. A ledger does not choose what it records. And a throne servant made of fire does not get to return to the soft limitations of flesh. Chapter 8. The name that replaced Enoch. Then comes the name. Metatron. The sound itself arrives like a sealed object from a tradition that never fully explains it. It is not a biblical name in the ordinary sense. It belongs to the hidden corridors of mystical literature. And in the story, a new name is not cosmetic. A new name means the old identity can no longer carry what the being has become. Enoch was a man. Enoch had a lineage. Enoch had a place in the generations before the flood. Metatron is something else. A throne servant, a heavenly prince, a scribe, a witness, a power standing dangerously near God. The name does not honor Enoch, it replaces him. That is the dark reversal at the center of the whole tradition. Enoch was not preserved in heaven. Enoch was overwritten. His righteousness did not protect his identity. It made him eligible for transformation. His closeness to God did not keep him safe. It brought him close enough to be changed completely. And once the name Metatron appears, the story becomes irreversible. You cannot turn a being of fire, eyes, wings, and heavenly office back into the man who vanished from earth. You cannot return the furnace to the flesh. You cannot give a cosmic scribe back the small mercy of an ordinary grave. The man Enoch is not dead, but that may be the more frightening fate. Chapter 9. The scribe made from a body. Metatron's role deepens the horror because it gives the transformation a purpose. In later tradition, he becomes the heavenly scribe, the recorder of deeds, the witness of human history. That sounds almost noble until you remember what he had to become in order to do it. A human body was converted into the instrument that watches other human bodies. A man who once lived inside time now records the moral weight of time itself. Every action, every hidden intention, every forgotten wrong becomes part of the ledger. And the scribe is not imagined as a gentle librarian. He is fire-disciplined into bureaucracy. He is memory given wings. He is a living archive standing close enough to the throne that his authority becomes dangerous. The body horror and the theology are the same wound. The flame did not merely make him bright. The flame made him official. Heaven took a man and turned him into a function no angel born in heaven could fulfill in the same way, because Enoch knew the human side of the record. He knew breath. He knew earth. He knew walking, choosing, waiting, fearing, aging. Then all of that was burned into a form that could never rejoin it. That is the loneliness inside the horror. The scribe of humanity is no longer permitted to be human. He records the world he was taken from with eyes that can never close. Chapter 10. The Throne Beside the Throne. The story becomes even more dangerous when Metatron is placed near the divine throne. In some mystical traditions, he is given authority so immense that heaven itself has to explain him carefully. He is called a prince of the presence, a ruler among angels, a servant bearing terrifying delegated power. And in the most dangerous language, he is associated with the title Lesser YHWH. That title is not a decoration, it is a theological wound. Because if a former human can stand so close to God, carry divine authority, and sit in heavenly office, then the boundary between creator and creature begins to feel frighteningly thin. This is why Metatron is not just an angelic figure. He is a problem. A man has been transformed so completely that he begins to look like a second power inside heaven. The body horror becomes doctrinal horror. Fire in the flesh becomes fire in the idea of God. The question is no longer what happened to Enoch. The question becomes, what kind of heaven can make Metatron? What kind of divine order takes a righteous man, burns him into office, crowns him with authority, and then expects the universe not to tremble at the sight? Metatron is terrifying because he is not rebellion. He is obedience taken to an unbearable scale. He does not challenge the throne. He exists because the throne allowed him to exist. Chapter 11. The heavenly court had to control him. That is why later tradition cannot leave Metatron untouched. A being this close to the throne creates a crisis by simply existing. If he stands, he is a servant. If he sits, he becomes a question. And in heaven, some questions are too dangerous to remain theoretical. The story of a sage seeing Metatron seated becomes one of the most frightening turns in the tradition. The observer sees the throne, sees the authority, and draws the forbidden conclusion. Perhaps there are two powers in heaven. That mistake is the wound Metatron carries. Not because he wanted to be worshipped, not because he rebelled like Lucifer, because his transformation made him look too much like what only God is supposed to be. And the heavenly court answers by humiliating the appearance of divinity around him. The point is not destruction. The point is correction. Metatron must be shown as a servant because his body has become too persuasive. His fire, crown, throne, and name all argue silently against the boundary theology needs to protect. This is the final trap of his transformation. He is made too exalted to be ordinary but not divine enough to be free. He is lifted beyond angels, then reminded that he can still be commanded. The man was erased into office. The office was raised near the throne. And then heaven had to prove that the throne had not created a second God. Chapter 12. The Man Who Could Not Return. This is the final cruelty hidden inside the transformation. There is no path back. Enoch cannot descend to his family and explain what happened. He cannot return to the earth as an old man with a strange memory of heaven. He cannot die the death that would have made him part of the human story again. He has been removed from every ordinary ending. No grave will hold him. No descendant will bury him. No human hand will close his eyes, because those eyes are no longer human eyes. They are torches in the heavenly record. The world below may remember Enoch as the man who walked with God, but heaven remembers him as Metatron, the being made from that walk. That is what the safe version cannot bear to say. Walking with God did not simply bring Enoch closer to life. It brought him close to a fire that does not leave flesh unchanged. And perhaps that is why the Genesis line is so brief. Perhaps the text falls silent because the next part is not meant to be spoken plainly. There are transformations human language can only gesture toward. There are rewards that look like erasure when viewed from the ground. There are forms of holiness that do not comfort the body. They consume it into purpose. Chapter 13. Enoch was not taken. So, the reversal is simple, and it is terrible. Enoch was not taken like a child carried home. He was taken like material selected for a sacred construction. The man did not vanish because the story ended. He vanished because the next stage of the story could no longer happen on earth. The grave was denied him, not because he was spared, but because his body was claimed for another use. Flesh became flame because flesh was not enough. Eyes became torches because human sight was not enough. The name Enoch became Metatron because a human name was not enough. And somewhere in that change, the most frightening question appears. If this is what happened to the man who walked with God, what does closeness to the divine really mean? Maybe the danger's not being rejected by heaven. Maybe the danger's being accepted too completely. Maybe the fire does not come for the wicked first. Maybe it comes for the one person pure enough to survive being remade. And if Metatron still writes, still watches, still stands in the hidden court of the tradition, then the story of Enoch is not only an ancient mystery, it is a warning about what the human body becomes when heaven stops treating it as a body. So leave your judgment carefully. Was Enoch blessed, erased, or transformed into something beyond both words? Write your verdict below and subscribe before the next sealed name is opened. Because in these traditions, the oldest horror is not that heaven takes the wicked. It is that heaven may take the righteous first.